thank you all for coming on behalf of the Certificate of Sephardic Heritage, Jewish Unity Through Diversity, Jeannie Milgram, and Reconnectar. We are really honored today to be hosting Professor Renée Levine Melammed, who is a professor of Jewish history at the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem. She researches the lives of conversos, Sephardi and Oriental Jewish women, Salonican Jewry, and women's lives as reflected in the Cairo Geniza. Among her publications are numerous articles in 4 languages and 3 books. She is also the academic editor of Nashim. She is also a scholar of the Geniza, which hopefully we will talk about at another time, not the topic today. And we have had many conversations about many things, and I'm excited to hear today about our talk because we're focusing now on Castile, which we haven't in the past. I want to remind you that next week we will have a session again with Professor Melammed talking about the women and particularly the women's roles in the crypto-Jewish society. So it's going to give a little bit of a different view of what we're doing. I want to remind everybody also that this is an ongoing series, and I encourage you to follow us wherever you normally follow people. And also to remind you that we have our auction going on with some very interesting prizes, including Chanukiah by Oded Halachni. So I'm very excited to be doing that. You will get all that in the follow-up email. And I know you didn't come to hear me give all these little plugs, so I will turn the stage over to Professor Melammed. And again, your microphones and cameras are off, but if you have any comment that's really urgent, or even if it's not urgent, I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, so please do throw it in there. Professor Melammed.
Okay, thank you, Drora. And hello, I say good evening, but it's only evening by me and Drora. The focus of my talk will be to explain various characteristics of Crypto-Judaism as I've discovered through Inquisition documents. But I know that you have a series here of various talks, and I'm not sure what you know background-wise, so bear with me. I always go backwards before I go forward, except in the car, hopefully. And to give you just some background from my perspective as to the creation of the crypto-Jewish phenomenon. So those of you who know it, it will be a review, and those of you who don't, I hope that this will give you some perspective, because while the crypto-Judaism that has been documented and which we know about because of the Inquisition documents, it obviously existed before the establishment of the Inquisition. And as you probably know, in 1391 there were terrible pogroms and riots in Spain in the summer, and the few things I want to point out, because we're going to be talking also about whether government is involved or isn't involved and whatnot. The pogroms, these riots in 1391, were not government initiated, but rather they actually sparked on by an anti-Semitic demagogue in Seville named Ferran Martinez. And all throughout the summer, these riots and these attacks on the Jewish communities spread throughout. I will not go into the reasons for it. I think that I have probably read so many articles with economic factors and anti-Semitic factors and you name it, and lots of them then say, well, it really was all through greed. There certainly was a high level of greed involved there. And if you're going to attack and pillage, and you might have something, you have something to be gained. But the bottom line was, despite the fact that this was spontaneous and sort of spread, the image I used was like a wildfire, that it would go, wildfire would go whichever way the wind goes. The wind might go east, and then the riot might move that way, and then stop in one place, and then skip over a spot, and continue to and start up in another area. But the result was that the tens of thousands of Jews converted. Many of them, at least according to my teacher, Yosef Yerushalmi, said that many of them imagined that this was going to pass. That this was not, they were not converting because of belief, but they figured, we've been here for so long, we're Spaniards, and we'll hopefully next week they'll let us go back to being Jews again, because this was something that was just, an insane moment. And I do need to point out the fact that many Jews also died. There are, there have been documents, especially from the city of Toledo, but we're going to be focusing on those who opted to convert. This was the largest group of converts ever in Jewish history. And I think what you need to also understand is that this phenomenon altered Spanish society radically. And when I say Spanish society, I mean all the levels of society. And it altered the Jewish society tremendously, obviously because of the loss, the damage among the converts. We have from every level. We have the poor, we have the middle class, we have rabbis, we have this. Again, some are dying and as martyrs, but some of them are also converting, and the communities that are afterwards that still survived are having a difficult time dealing, but Christian society is completely changed as well. It's a shock. This wasn't planned. Had it been planned, it might have taken a different course. But because it wasn't planned, we have the Christian society is also looking and saying, well, what happened now? What was done? What should we do? What do we do with all this new group? What do we do with all of these people? Should we help them? Should we teach them? How are we going to proceed from here? And also, I need to point out the fact that since it was not done in any orderly way, we have families that are destroyed. We have families where you have the father might have been out on a business trip, and when he comes back, he discovers his whole family is Catholic now, but he isn't. Or grandparents living in one particular village and discover that their entire family, their children and grandchildren are now Catholics, and they're not. Or a husband and a wife, and we know that there were cases of couples that were also were split. And so that this was the destruction here, and the effects were just really devastating from a personal level to a communal level to the entire society. What is the church supposed to do? Because according to the church, all Catholics are equal. There's no discrimination. There's no, you're not supposed to be considering anyone who was a convert to be anything but a new brother. Yeah, here we've got someone who should be on an equal footing with everyone. But again, should they be educated? And they're looking at them. There's no monolithic image of these conversos, and we might say converso community, and I purposely say it in the air quotes because there isn't a community. There's a broken Jewish community, former Jewish community, with all of these former Jews who are trying to figure out, well, what do I do now? Do I try to be a good Catholic? Is it, I'm going to get all kinds of privileges that I didn't have before. I can run for mayor. I can join a monastery. I can be a priest if I want to. I mean, look at all of these, these amazing things that I can do now that I couldn't do before. Or others to say, wow, this was a huge mistake. And I'm going to try to keep a low profile, but I guess I can't walk into synagogue, but I can do whatever I can do in my home, and again, wait out and see and see what happens. So what we have is this tremendous alteration, this radical alteration of society, and this new phenomenon of these converts. And it is, I think the best term to use is that it's destabilizing. It really destabilized Spain in many, many ways. And you should know that there were debates in the government and in the church as to what do we do? Can we absorb them? Is it possible for them to absorb? Or can we teach them? Could we suspect them? I mean, how do we know why did they convert? Well, okay, they didn't want to die. It was a choice to the sword or conversion. But now, do we suspect them of being secret Jews? Do we suspect them of being able to become a good Catholic? Are there any of them who are sincere, or are they just metamorphized Jews? And are we going to just see them that way? Again, technically, they're all Christians. Technically, they have all the privileges that the church says that they're entitled to. But from the perspective of the average Spanish Catholic, this was a group that had no more checks and balances. We can't stop them from doing anything, now like we could have beforehand. There are no limits. Uh, and basically what happens is that so we've got 1391 with tens of thousands. It's very hard. The numbers are, nobody counted and nobody really knows, but we'll just say, for the sake of argument, tens of thousands. And then we have another generation. And the next generation, these children are being born as Catholics. They're being baptized. They're not former Jews, but they're being born, they're only knowing life as Catholics, in theory at least, unless their family opts to teach them about their heritage. And that could easily lead to some, a secret kind of observance. There is no policing of them. There's no policing of them for the first, almost for the first century, but there's suspicions. There are suspicions, and it's it's difficult. It's difficult for them to figure out how to what path to take. And it's also difficult for Christian society to know if they can trust them, if they can accept them. On the whole, we have them intermarrying. The conversos are marrying conversos. They're not, running to marry the other Catholics, and the other Catholics aren't, aren't running to accept them. I mean, there are phenomena like that later on with where there will be some absorption there, but on the whole, they tend to stay in a sort of a group of sorts. There are some cases, but again, how do you do it if you want to keep your Judaism or any ties to Judaism? Then you better stay with someone who also comes from a Jewish background, even though by second and third generations, the question as to how much has really been passed on. But things happen. For example, we get a problem in the city of Toledo in the 1440s. So notice I've jumped again. We don't have a tremendous amount of documentation, as we have rabbinical treatises and comments regarding Jews dealing and Jews with conversos, and so and what happened. But on the whole, we don't know about their inner lives very well. But the assumption is that some of them have to become Christians who are being absorbed into that world, or being at least, feeling that they're part of the Catholic world. We have some who are falling in the middle and are neither here nor there, and others who are feeling that they're still Jewish and trying to pass it on. But again, because they're allowed to sort of to do the gates are open to them to do everything. In the city of Toledo, we have a group that is very, very unhappy with these these converso taxpayers, tax collectors, tax collectors, and there were converso, there were Jewish tax collectors as well. But we have riots in the 1440s, and they are not against the Jews; they are against the conversos. And there's this is a whole story unto itself that I won't go into, but what we see as a result of it, the city of Toledo sort of takes the lead and comes up with discriminatory rules, which again are against what the church says. You cannot discriminate a Christian versus Christian. They're the ones who come up with the idea of new Christians. These new Christians, it's 50 years now, from 1990, from 1391 to 1440s. It's quite a gap of time there, and these new Christians are being labeled, and are being sought out and are being discriminated against, at least in the city of Toledo, and what the laws that they call the limpieza de sangre, the purity of blood laws, which they're trying to say you cannot be a tax collector, you cannot have other government kinds of jobs if you are descended from Jews. This is something that should be unacceptable. The church has to pick its fights, and this whole idea of limpieza de sangre starts there, but eventually spreads through Spain and Portugal. This new term, new Christian, this is an ethnic term. This is ethnic anti-Semitism. It's sort of like the hatred of the Jews being transferred to the conversos. And again, not just calling them converso or confieso, which we also find in some of the documents, but calling them nuevo cristianos and the new Christians. And we are the viejos cristianos. We're the old Christians. We're the ones who have all the credit and can be trusted. Again, the church says you can't discriminate like this, but there's so much tension and so much suspicion that is spreading through Spanish Catholic society that they really can't control it. And it leads up, I'm obviously, leaping over many occurrences because I don't want to do a history of Spain for you, but leads up to the idea of establishing an Inquisition because of suspicions that there are those who are heretics, who are not faithful Catholics, who are not abiding by the dogma of the Catholic Church, and there's also an ulterior motive on the part of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who are from almost two different countries. I mean, Castile and Aragon are really being run separately until the two of them get married in 1469. And so here we've got them joining together in 1474, I believe, and thinking, you know what, having an institution that will be a national institution might really work very well for us. So in short, what we have is the crown turns to the Pope to get permission to establish an Inquisition, because that's the only way that you could do it. Even though I will tell you that the Spanish Inquisition ignores many of the papal decrees and rules and how you're supposed to run things, but they do get the formal permission they ask in 1478. And in 1481, the first court is established in Seville. Note that that's where the riots began. That's where everything starts all over again. And again, this was in order to extirpate heresy, was a term that used. These were conversos who are being accused of Judaizing, of observing Judaism, which is not appropriate for a baptized Catholic. Again, by 1481, we've got we've got 90 years that have passed since the original mass conversions. There are other conversions in the middle. Again, I'm not going into the whole history of Spain, but 90 years have passed. Now, the information that we have that we're able to access is from these Inquisition records. They are legal proceedings. They are very kept fastidiously and recorded by the notaries. They are, again, I'm just going to touch on this so that especially when next week when I bring in examples, samples and things, you will see where they're taken from, that you have a prosecutor who comes with an accusation and accuses, you accuse a new Christian, but you have to have available information. You don't just come up and say, I accuse them. You have to have a certain amount of witness testimonies, and and thus there's a list of charges there. When they bring in the accused, they will ask if the accused wants to confess. If so, the confession is recorded there carefully. You have actually two witness accounts, which is again very interesting, and I won't go into this in depth because we don't have enough time. But you've got a witness account for the prosecution, which means you have the list of the witnesses and their names and exactly what they said. But you also have a separate witness account with no names on it for the defense. And they can try to attack it, but it's definitely guesswork. There is a defense. There is a lawyer who is appointed to prepare a defense. They can sit with the accused, and there are actually defense tactics which are very, very interesting. Sometimes there are interrogation, questions, answers, follow-up questions and things. Torture, at least in Castile, for the first 100 years was not as common as one might think. I will tell you that the first Inquisition trial that I ever saw, that I ever read, was at the Jewish Theological Seminary, because I remember that Nachum Sarna used to be the librarian there, and he told me if you're going down, it was like 3 volumes of it, and I sat, and there was torture there, and I remember sitting and being close to tears, sitting on the floor in the library at JTS, the first trial that I ever read. There's a very clear sentence that is given at the end. These are secret documents that are for internal use. So, for example, if one defendant, let's say, flees or maybe is absolved, or somehow it does not get a death sentence, and move somewhere else, or they know of someone, an inquisitor from another area can send a letter and say, could you please give me a copy of the information you have about such and such, and then they would write it and literally send it there and hand sew it into the document, the information they got from elsewhere. And the sentences range from, like I said, some are actually absolved, some are reconciled because they decided to repent there, and then obviously some of them are sentenced to prison sentences, as well as to death. What I want to show you now are just some examples. Hopefully this will come up okay. All right. Had a little bit of difficulty before. Yes, I just want you to see, this is the cover of trial. You can see it says Toledo, the Inquisition of Toledo, Judaizantes, the Judaizers there. And I'm pointing out here. And then they put the name, Lopez Isabel, vecina de Cogolludo. She was a resident of the village of Cogolludo, y mujer de Francisco de Murcia. And the wife and the husband, they always put if she's married, the name in. And here you can also see that she actually did get the death sentence relaxed. We were relaxed when you're burned at the stakes, that's called a relaxation. Her trial was from 1516 to 1518. It was 2 years worth. And then you have the number of the trial, which exactly what file it is, a number, and you can see here is the stamp from the Inquisition to show you that it is in the Inquisition files. Here is another cover just to see you, and also just different handwriting. I thought I would just show you. This was from, again, Toledo, a judaizante, Leonor Nunez, the wife of Dr. Fernando. Here we've got, she's a wife of a doctor here. She's also relajada, 1531 to 1535. Here, I just want to give you a sample of what those of us who deal with 16th century handwriting of the scribes, it is an amazing challenge. And so we've got, here is one sample of scribal, Spanish scribal writing that says genealogy there. Here is another cover. You can see this one the first page has much more information there because they had all kinds of additions to make. A completely different handwriting. You can see the different scribe, but the numbers here they're lists of the charges. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Those little squiggles are the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. There. Here is, again, another handwriting, and these are, again, lists of questions and testimonies. Here, again, we have a list of what she has accused of having done. And just again here, this is one of a woman who was a midwife there. Oops, and that was my book that was based on it, but that's okay. All right, we will stop the share now. So I just wanted you to have an idea of what those of us who look for information about Crypto-Judaism, at least from the earlier period, because handwritings change from century to century, and the rules change. But at least in the 16th century, there was total lack of rules. It was really, really hard to read this, but those of us who do it, find a challenge. Okay, so what I promise is to talk about the rest of the time, to talk about the characteristics of Crypto-Judaism. And what do I mean by this? Well, we know what Judaism is. We have a pretty good idea of what normative Judaism is, what is done today, or what was done in the Middle Ages, or what, with without changes, whether you go halachically, but what might be done, what should be done, how it's done, how is a Jewish family set up, how is Jewish life set up. But this is different. We have to look at it very differently, not the way that we would, and not to judge it the same way, and not to have the same expectations. And basically, I have 4 different categories that I divide up when I discuss the Crypto-Judaism and its nature. One is the fact that it is a clandestine religion. The moment it's underground, it's completely different. I mean, think about Soviet Jewry from way back and what could be observed, what couldn't be observed. And any religion that is clandestine is going to be noted for 2 things: for its lacunae, for what's missing. There are lots of things you cannot do if you have an illegal secret religion. You cannot circumcise your sons. And the famous story of Luis de Carvajal in Mexico went and circumcised himself. He was just about handing himself in. And these parents were not going to do this because they would know they would be damning their sons. So there's something that's going to fall by the wayside immediately. When Sukkot comes, can you build a sukkah? In the very early years before the Inquisition, there were there were conversos who were going out into the fields and putting up a little hut of some sort and doing, and some kind of sukkah. But you can't do that because you're basically saying, this is, I'm not faithful. I'm not a faithful Catholic. And once the Inquisition is established, then obviously these things become much more dangerous. So before the Inquisition, you don't do it because it's not appropriate. You want to bring the attention, you don't want to bring the attention to the local priests, even to your neighbors, because it's just not comfortable. But once the Inquisition is established, then these things you would be burying yourself. So there are many lacunae that are involved. But there are also additions, which is also, if you think about it, really quite interesting because there are things that people might think are Jewish. People might think that have to be done, that were done Jewishly. I think that next week I will talk about this, but some of them came up with a new custom. It was really sort of a psychological fight against the baptism. And after having their babies baptized, they would take them home and they'd wash them off and they call it debaptizing them. Debaptizar. Okay, this is not written anywhere. It's not in any, you won't find it in the Talmud, you won't find it anywhere that they talk about debaptizing your children. But this also became part of the religion of some of these crypto Jews because they needed it to say, see, I don't accept it. I'm rejecting what was going on. Okay, so first, like I said, we've got the clandestine nature of the religion. Second, the framework. There is for the first 90 years, you have three groups. You've got the original Spanish Catholics, you've got the Jews who survived, and you've got the converts. Okay, so that there is contact, and there is contact between the Jews and the converts. By the way, the Spanish expulsion decree says specifically that the Jews are being expelled because they are a bad influence on the converts, and they're not allowing them to be sincere, and they're teaching them. And there are instances they are going and knocking on the door and asking for help and asking for supplies and asking for instructions and sometimes having get-togethers with them. But again, in the Inquisition documents, the Inquisition starts in 14. If the Inquisition starts starts functioning in 1481, and the Jews are expelled in 1492, then just note the Jews are only in Spain for 11 years during the Inquisition's activities. The Inquisition is not against the Jews, it's against the converts, against only against those who have been baptized, not Jews. A Jew who have been only under one circumstance could Jews be pulled in for interrogation, and they rarely are. So you've got, as of 1492, no living example. No, there's no one to learn from. There's no one to ask for instruction, for help. They're stripped of any convert who wants to be a crypto Jew, to be a Judaizante, finds that his world or her world is stripped of the accoutrements of normative Judaism. There's no more moral support from a Jewish community. They're bereft of all of the religious institutions. There are no more synagogues. Now, they weren't really going to synagogue, but you can imagine that sometimes they might on Friday night walk by and hear the melodies and sort of think, oh, wow, hum to themselves or remember what used to be there. There are no more synagogues anymore. There's no mikveh. So even if a woman wanted to observe the laws of cleanliness, she can't. There are no functionaries. There are no leaders, no official Jewish leaders anymore. There are no rabbis. There are no cantors. There are no teachers, formal teachers. There's no ritual slaughters, no shochtim. There are no circumcises, no mohalim. Okay, now we just said that they probably wouldn't be, the mohel wouldn't be earning a great living anyway because it became too difficult with the establishment of the Inquisition. But just understand that suddenly everything is gone overnight, and there's no literature. It's illegal to have Hebrew literature, so you don't have a Siddur, you don't have a prayer book, you don't have a Bible, you don't have the Talmud, you don't have Hebrew. I mean, the Hebrew learning and everything. It's extremely difficult. So here you're trying to have a continue your Jewish heritage, but you're lacking this huge, huge important framework. My third characteristic is the time factor. I keep pointing out how much time has passed since 1391, and you've got one generation, two generations, three generations, four, whatever, and you don't have the books. So what happens? So what happens here? Well, everything is being orally transmitted. This becomes an oral religion because we don't have the books to teach to go. Occasionally, here and there are copies of a few secret and hidden books, but most of them can't. After 100 years, most of them can't read Hebrew anyway, and it's all depending upon memory. And we know well that when we play, when you play the game of somebody in the back of the room is whispering to and passing some secret around to the rest of the members of the people in the room, and by the time it gets to the last person, it's been sort of really can be messed up and distorted and whatnot. So just imagine what happens over time and over the years, and again over dozens, I would say, of decades, time after time after time, with people just doing what you remember and transmitting orally. So things are going to be confused. Things are not going to be precise. And the fourth characteristic or intricate nature or intrinsic nature here of Crypto-Judaism is that these individuals are living with a threat, the threat of the Inquisition. Once it's established, then this is just hanging over them, hanging over their heads, and it's a fear. You don't know who might be watching you. You might know, but who might be approached or interested in giving information to the Inquisition, and at what point, sometimes people saw things and then didn't report them until much, much later. I can't go into now the whole idea of these grace periods, but there were periods when they asked individuals to come, and they sort of opened up an office and said, come and tell us. Anybody who knows anything, come and tell us. Anyone who wants to confess anything, come and give us your confessions. And you don't know who might turn up there. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be your children. Your children might not believe everything that you're telling them, and they have been indoctrinated very well into Catholicism, so that there's this threat that makes observance extremely difficult. Now, the observance is being changed. I mentioned that we don't have any of these. We don't have these classic institutions. We don't have the. No one goes to synagogue. No one's going to a Beit Midrash, to a study hall. If anything you're going to be doing, it's going to be on a completely different or on only one basis, which is basically within the home, in the family. That's where you're going to have to observe. And even observing in the home is extremely dangerous and extremely unreliable, because everyone has servants. And if you don't have servants, it's going to be very obvious. And you don't know, these servants are simple people on the whole. And again, if the Inquisition comes to town and says, come on, we're having open house, tell me anything you've seen, and they first give these lectures to say, this is what Judaism is like. In case you don't know it, they're giving you a nice lesson in Judaism. I always laugh that for the converso who didn't know Judaism very well, he could learn about it from these lectures. Excuse me. And so that even in your home, you don't know who might see you, what's safe, what isn't, and this becomes a very major challenge to observe and to maintain your secrecy. Excuse me. And we're left with the family as of all the institution. It's the only institution that's left in order to observe. There are no guarantees of safety, even there. There are external and internal dangers. And yet what we find, I think what's quite amazing is that so many of them actually chose to observe, despite the fact that once the Inquisition is established, it's life-threatening. It's something, that cannot be taken lightly. And what I did see, at least from my research, of Castile from the beginning of the Inquisition until about 1590, so like 100 years worth, is that the women who were traditionally responsible for maintaining the home, they took on a much more active role because they realized that they were the only ones who, were able to do it at this point. The husbands were not going, the husbands were not going to synagogue. They weren't studying the laws. They weren't, going to a yeshiva. They won't, whatever. And as a result, the women take on, the women who choose to take on a very important and central role. And you also can see it in teaching, because the Inquisition, it's funny, the first 20 years, they don't ask. And then they start asking, who taught you? Realizing that if they pull out the teachers, then they might have a better effect at damaging the crypto-Jewish world. And the majority of the teachers are the women, because the women are the one who are in the home, and the women are observing what they know within the home, which are the things that they can much more easily be observed. I had prepared, but I just don't think we have enough time for it. But I had brought the transcription of a trial that I translated. Well, one of them I translated with a woman who was tried in 1495 to 96, and she just has confession after confession after confession, because what you can see is that she came in and confessed when there was an open house to come in and make confessions, and then they were told, okay, you made a confession, now become a good Catholic, but if we catch you observing Judaism again, the second time there will be no mercy. And they catch her a second time, and they add and add and add, and each time you just see more and more and more. She knew an awful lot about what Jewish life was like, and the Inquisition got the opportunity to hear about it, and unfortunately to try her. So I know that Drora wanted me to stop at 45, so I'm going to, and I guess we can open up the questions if there are.
There are some, and I encourage you to continue to write them in. But maybe we'll take a few minutes anyway to take a look at it after a few
Okay.
questions.
Okay, fine.
That's okay. But first question, was there a financial benefit to report a new Christian to the Inquisition?
Big fat no. Big fat no. These like I said, when the Inquisition established courts in different places, some of them were temporary and some of them were permanent. For example, in Toledo that I worked on, that was permanent. But when the Inquisition was sent out to, say, to a smaller area where they heard that there's a problem there, that there were, there were a number of crypto Jews there, then they would, like I said, they would make an announcement. We're starting trials in X amount of time, but we first have to build up the case. And they just basically said, if you want to be a good Catholic, this is what you should do. You should let us know about heretics. You should let us know about apostates. This is what the Pope advocates. And so come in and tell us, and there was no payment absolute whatsoever. No one was paid. They just got a pat on the back. Thank you very much. You're being an absolutely great, and you're being a great Catholic, and and faithful to the church.
So there was, okay, that's very interesting. You mentioned the term relaxation. Can you explain that?
Okay, this is the word that the church uses for when you relax a heretic. You basically, um, they would take them. There was an auto de fe, which I think most people have heard about, when 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 a particular court had a number um, of convicted sinners, then they would have a big procession. They would have to they would have permission. These were very expensive affairs, but they would have a public procession in the town center, and they would announce everybody to come out and see the auto de fe. This is the fe is faith, and you would come, and they would march them. They would have San Benitos, which are these um, they were coverings that had your name on it, your last name on it, with the big cross, red and one, and they would march you around, and then it would depend upon what degree of what degree of a sinner you are. If you are a sinner who could possibly be reconciled because you hadn't done something really, really terrible, and you said, I'm really sorry, and I'm going to be a good Catholic now, and so on and so forth, then you would be sort of in one group. But those who were either refused to repent, or the court decided they had perfect reason to condemn them as heretics, then they would say to them at the last minute, if we could take pity on you, and we can hang you first and then burn you, or we can burn you alive. And either way, they would put up the big crosses, and they would put these people up. They take off the San Benitos, and they would hang them in the church, so that that family would know, to be embarrassed and ashamed, and for generations, that family had heretics in it. But this is called relaxing a heretics, when you hung them up on the cross and you burn them.
Doesn't sound very relaxing.
Yes.
What would be the benefit of the confessions that you said that there were like open house days of confessions? Why would
Yeah.
somebody go and do that?
Oh, because first of all, in the early years, this seemed like, if there was a family that they were serious Judaizers, the family would actually sometimes get together, and they have a meeting to discuss what to do. What do we think? What do you think we should do? Should we go? Should we not go? And some of them said, look, let's go, but let's decide what to tell them. Like, don't tell them everything, because you look like you're a rabbi. I mean, you'll just look like you're way too religious. But tell them a few things, and then maybe they'll leave us alone, because then we'll tell them that we're going to be good Catholics. Because they thought, we have servants, we don't know what and servants were I'd say, the most prevalent witnesses in the trials. And it's sort of interesting, because the Pope said you can't rely on them. They're untrustworthy. They're low-level people, and whatnot. And the Spanish Inquisition said, well, they're our best bet. And so so that we have so that we wait, I'm back. I distracted myself here. Um, Joy, what did you ask me? I'm sorry.
I asked why somebody would come to
Oh,
confession.
why would go confessions? Excuse me. Yeah. So they don't know if their servants might have seen them, then it's better for them to
Get ahead of
to say, this is what we did. Yeah, and they would always yeah, my mother made me light candles, or my father wouldn't let me eat pork, or something like this, or my sister, whatever it is, and play everything down. It was a decision, and sometimes it worked, but like I said, they were admonished at the end when after giving the confession, that that's it. This is your one chance. You're going to be reconciled now, but if we find that you're observing Judaism, we get it next time around, you're going to be relaxed. You're going to, this, and many of them we have, more than one set, because the next time they come in and they sort of fill in and whatnot. Yeah.
So people were excited when you said about the transcript, and they were asking if you would send it in a follow-up email or if it's published somewhere,
Um,
or maybe you'll talk about it next week. I don't know.
Okay, here we go. Okay, the relaxation transfer the jurisdiction okay, so that's a very good point, because we've got a combination of church and state here in these trials, of which, like who's getting the money, if you're found, once you're arrested, they freeze all your assets, and then if you're found guilty, then for the period that you have been observing, then they take all of your funds there. So there's a lot of money going on here, and the theoretically they're not supposed to be killing people, whatever. But look, I can show you the um, this the what I have. I mean, again, it's hold it here. Oh, wait a second. I think we started to look at it before.
Right.
Yeah, so you notice I wrote, this is from 1495 to 6, Leonor Alvarez, her first confession. And then, they say this is the formal term, she kisses the hand of the Lordship, confessed to him by contrition of my soul, my sins and my guilts, and da-da-da. She's trying to do a really, good, solid confession. And then she says, firstly, I declare my guilt that a few times I fasted the major fasts, being Yom Kippur, and other fasts that the Jews fast for myself and the company of others. I observed some Sabbath and Passover holidays, thinking that it being mandated by the law of Moses, it would be advantageous for the salvation of my soul. And this was done by me through warning from some converso women, bad Christians, who told me that it was safeguarded in the law of Moses. So this was the wording that she chose to try to say, I'm not really guilty. Some bad Christians gave me some bad advice. But then she said, oh, by the way, I also, I declare my guilt that sometimes I ate meals that the bad Christians prepared on Friday for the Sabbath when I went to their homes. Now, she didn't do it. She said somebody else's house. And sometimes I ate unleavened bread that these women gave to me, and I ate as a Jewish ceremony. One Sabbath, I wore clean clothes. And also I gave some oil to some of the converso women because I promised it and gave it to her in cash. And she said she promised it to the synagogue, oil for the lamps in the synagogues. She was talking to them, and they believed their words and their warnings that the law of Moses was good and enough for the salvation of the nation. And they made me doubt the faith of Jesus Christ until I got to get together with my husband, because since then I was always firm in the faith. So here, her husband obviously was not a Judaizer, and she knew she better be careful around him. And we do have couples like that. We do have some old Christian, new Christian couples, not a ton of them, but they're really interesting. And then she says, I believed in, now look what they also think might be Judaizing. I believed in fortune and sorceresses in order to know the things of the future. And here my confessors, he absolved me of these things, and I was absolved before the Inquisition. Before the Inquisition came, after it came, I didn't dare show these things to the inquisitors or to my husband, because I knew him as a vigorous and loather of the conversos. She knew her husband hated conversos, although he married one. And I took it for certain he would kill me or annul my marriage. This is a very unusual confession, by the way. And so I didn't have the nerve to reconcile myself and believe that in order to save my soul, the absolution of my confessors would suffice. So she's saying, I already confessed at confession before the Inquisition came, but I'm doing it again now because I don't think it was good enough the first time around. Now, she's really doing it because she's afraid they're going to try her and that they'll find out from someone else. And I thought that time had passed since I committed these sins, like I didn't think I'd be discovered. The time had passed. And the fear of what I've said weighs on greatly for not being reconciled. And then I declare my here. my guilt of the crimes against the Lord our God, and I have the faith in Christ. And then she goes from, I abandoned Jewish rights because for 20 years or so, I do not recall having offended God. And so she says, it was 20 years ago, like this is old hat. Now she's doing this in 1495. So she's talking about way before the Inquisition. And she's talking about consciences and being guilty. And she says, and here, and because this is more certain, because I do not know how to write. Okay, so she's letting us know that she is illiterate. She's begging the confessor to record it and sign it in his name, and this was made in 1495. And here, oops, what did I do? I must have pressed something wrong. I paused it by mistake. Okay. There, sorry about that. Those magic buttons. And then like a month later, she comes in and she says, oh, okay, I'm in prison now and I have contrition and I confessed and I was a prison in Granada and I was a prison here and there, and being a girl and being in the house of a conversa teacher of sewing, the Sabbath day was observed and they didn't give signals to me or to the others that we should do anything. So we didn't sew on the Sabbath. And in childhood, again, she was a child, so she, she's not to be held responsible for this. She was a home of another cousin, and she was taught to observe there and observe. And then she goes back again to Yom Kippur and what she gave to eat afterwards, casseroles and chicken. I was 9 or 10, and she continues again. All the different things that she was invited here, she was here, there were other people there. I'm not really to blame. The wording is very, specific here. On Fridays, I clean candles, and sometimes I dressed up on Shabbat, and sometimes I fasted. Maybe it was Yom Kippur, she wasn't sure. But then even later, I ate some matzah, and then she said, my sister and I, so she brings her sister in here, did on Yom Kippur, and all the various things. She repeats herself, as what she did, that she's being a sinner in front of who she did it. And then she has another confession here, where she says, I forgot a few things and offenses. So I begged them to listen. And she's saying, a son of mine had a girlfriend who placed on him certain spells. So she's confused. She thinks magic is also part of, Jewish stuff. And he desired her greatly, and even so much that he wanted to go mad. And the girlfriend knew I wanted to do her ill, and I knew it. I mean, she goes on this whole thing about these spells, which is actually quite, unusual as well. And then in order to know about things to come, so she wanted to speculate, she wanted to find out the future. So she thought that this is something the church would really be upset about. And here, and then she says, who told me and ordered the Arabic letters to be torn up and not to draw lots. So these were other things that she thought that she shouldn't be doing because someone must have given it to her. And she reveals again here that there was some lighting of candles and there was some praying there. But again, she's talking about stuff in the 70s, way before the expulsion, and not eating pork and not spitting. So she's sort of repeating herself and talking about a bowl they stole and talking about the future. So she's mixing things up because she's not highly educated, but she sees that, that she knows some of the things she shouldn't be doing, and she ends it, I request pardon and penitence, and I declare all about this came to my notice. I offended our Redeemer. I would say with great pain, I will remember and know where and what to do. So this is a very long, one of the longest confessions I ever saw, because you usually don't have 3 there, but she kept thinking of something else. But she also you see the confusion, talking about things that she thought were Jewish that were not at all. There.
Thank you. I want to be conscientious of the time, even though there are other questions. So I encourage you to send me the questions, and hopefully we can work it into follow-up discussions. I do see that there were some, I know. So thank you, Professor Melammed, again. This was really a great talk. I want to make sure to mention the books. You kind of mentioned them a little bit, but 3 of her books that have to do with this topic, well, 2 that have to do with this topic.
The first 2.
Heretics or Daughters of Israel, the Crypto-Jewish Women of Castile, and A Question of Identity, Iberian Conversos in Historical Perspective. So I know everybody usually likes to have some follow-up. And I encourage you to send me the questions. Please participate in our auction, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week. Thank you.
Thank you.